Hello, everybody. My name is Spencer Walsh. Welcome to today's show. And what a monumentous show it is set out to be. Ladies and gentlemen, we have our first ever conviction of a U.S. president for felonies. 34, conviction period of a U.S. president. 34 felony counts Donald Trump was convicted on yesterday in a New York courtroom. We will have all the details for you on that. Got tons to cover, including the reaction from Joe Biden and the Republicans. And just, my general take on all of the proceedings. We'll also get into the nuts and bolts of the case here and really why it was that Trump was unsuccessful. We will also talk about what happens next, what is the likelihood of him actually going to prison, and even during the convention, because it is more likely than you think. We'll give you the details on that. Also, the latest on a new ceasefire proposal put forth by Joe Biden for the situation in Gaza. We also have the reactions from both Benjamin Netanyahu and Hamas to said proposal. And we also have an interesting invitation extended from both sides of the U.S. government to Benjamin Netanyahu that we will end our show on. So essentially going to divide it half and half between Trump and Israel. Hopefully 15 versus 15, but no. I am recording this, kind of as the moment, so it's not like pre-recorded segments. I'm just recording the introduction, so I don't know how long I'm going to spend on each, but really it is an absolutely momentous day because it is the day, I guess when you're seeing this, it'll be the weekend after we have had the first conviction of presidents in U.S. history for any crime. Here it is in New York Times, incredible, it was about literally 6 bylines on this story, as it says Donald Trump was convicted on Thursday of falsifying records to cover up a sex scandal that threatened to derail his 2016 presidential campaign, capping an extraordinary trial that tested the resilience of the American justice system and transformed the former commander-in-chief into a felon. Ladies and gentlemen, Donald Trump is officially a felon. We can say that about him. All the liberal, your liberal resistance family members, I don't know if we have any real hardcore liberal resistance people that are listening to us, but if you are, and I say this as genuinely as possible, please, congratulations to you. You have stuck through it all, through the Mueller report, through the Zelensky phone call before Zelensky was even a big name, through every single up and down when it comes to finally getting Trump convicted of a crime. And today, or actually yesterday, but when you see this, it's going to be 2 days from the point, got a little podcasting. Trump has been finally convicted. While it was once unthinkable that Americans would elect a felon as their leader, Trump's insurgent behavior delights his supporters as he bulldozes the country's norms. Now the man who refused to accept his 2020 election loss is already seeking to delegitimize his conviction, attempting to assert the primacy of his raw political power over the nation's rule of law. And again, that there is a paragraph in the New York Times, you may think, it's a little bit dramatic. It's not, it is kind of crazy to have the conviction of a sitting president. I, as someone who believes pretty much all sitting presidents should be convicted of some sort of crime or another, I think they are all guilty. I think that is without a doubt Joe Biden, Barack Obama, especially George Bush. You can go down the line. Get Bill Clinton for the sanctions on Iraq. But anyway, I really think that this is a very good development because, again, it does show that no president is, I guess, again, all these words kind of come out of pile in my mouth because essentially every other president aside from Trump is above the law. But I think the biggest reality and the biggest difference with Trump is he was never a normal president. He was the first president that, at least in the modern era, in the era of, post-World War II, was truly outside the norms, truly an absolute, abhorrence to every single establishment force. And I think that plays a big role because, again, Trump is a criminal, but also every other president is a criminal. I think the main difference here is Trump is a petty criminal. He is someone who's debauched, who's debased, and Look at what he got convicted for. It was paying money to a porn star and falsifying the records to do so. Would George H.W. Bush pay money to a porn star and falsify the records to do so? If he did, let's just put it this way, you would never find out about it. And that is a big difference as to why I think Trump is convicted today. If you look at him in the broad scheme of American presidents, it's very, very hard for me to say that they're not all, really deeply guilty of something or another, depending on the time that they were around. Even one of our best presidents ever, FDR, was somebody who interned millions of Japanese American citizens in a way that was completely unnecessary and completely cruel. So it's like you go through all the lists. Like, these presidents have done bad things. That is a true fact. But with Trump, I think the big mistake he made is not only did he do bad things, the normal bad things a president's supposed to do in terms of, killing civilians abroad. That's something he definitely did. All these various crimes that in any self-respecting, any just society, he would be locked up for, especially, some of the things he did during Black Lives Matter with regards to the protest. But, this is petty stuff that no other president would do. And hence, here comes the hammer. And I think it's a much broader conversation, talking about Trump's relationship to established power in the United States. But the guilty verdict in Manhattan across the board on all 34 counts will reverberate throughout the nation and the world as it ushered in a new era of presidential politics. Trump will carry the stain of a verdict during his third run for the White House as voters now choose between an unpopular incumbent and officially, and again, it is so surreal to say this, a convicted criminal. As Trump learned his fate on Thursday, he showed little emotion, shutting his eyes and slowly shaking his head while a hush descended over the courtroom. But when he emerged, holding his jaw tense, the former president spoke to an assembled television camera. He declared the verdict was a disgrace, and with a somber expression proclaimed, the real verdict is going to be November 5th by the people, referring to Election Day. So that's something you're going to hear and definitely have heard a lot from various conservative media figures. The real verdict is going to be Election Day. The judge overseeing the case, Juan Merchan, released Trump on his own recognizance and set his sentencing for July 11th, just days before the RNC convenes and anoints him as the presidential nominee. What a surreal! Again, I think it's worth it, and it's not some sort of cringe thing, because I know a lot of people. I think it's very fair and something I've tried to avoid for the listener of this podcast. I try to tell you stuff that matters, that's going to be important, that's going to be impactful. I think I'm taking this moment today to tell you that this is a major, historical situation. Like, this is not something that you're going to see in something that we have literally, never seen throughout all the criminal history of all the presidents of our country. Even people who have been, involved in perpetrating some horrific crimes. We have never seen them have to deal with a sentencing hearing right before their convention, as a nominee of one of the major parties of American politics. Alvin Bragg, the prosecutor brought the case, declined to reveal Thursday whether he would seek a prison term. The judge could put Trump behind bars for up to 4 years, but the former president could receive probation instead and may never see the inside of a prison cell. His appeal could drag on for months or more, as he will remain free to campaign for the presidency while he awaits his punishment. So that is going to be a big thing. And there has been some speculation. There is a possibility that Trump could go to prison, but it is an outside possibility because he will go through the appeal case, and with someone of his stature, it's very likely that he'll be able to get out relatively quickly before he releases before he is able to go through the appeal process, which could take much longer. So I don't think we're going to see a long Trump prison sentence decided before the election. I think that's definitely not going to happen. But what you could see, given the sentencing is so close, so damn close to the July convention. July 11th is the date. I don't know. I think it's like 3 or 4 days before the convention starts. That he's due to be sentenced. So he could be in there for a period of time before the actual proceedings, the ball gets rolling on the appeal process. So that could be an absolutely crazy situation. The 12 New Yorkers who composed the jury needed nearly 10 hours to decide a case stemming from Trump's first White House run, when prosecutors say he perpetrated a fraud on the American people. The case, colored by tabloid intrigue, a secret payoffs, and an Oval Office pact that echoed the Watergate era, spotlighted months of scheming that begot a hush money payment to a porn star and a plot to falsify documents to bury all trace of that deal. Essentially, he said here, And according to, again, some pretty left, kind of liberal legal analysis I heard, actually from Bradley Moss. Bradley Moss was an Esquire. I think that's where I got the Q sound in there. I don't know. My brain is mushing things up today. But I think that analysis that I heard from him on an interview, I actually forget where exactly the interview, but it was, he essentially said that it was the fact that Trump went into this trial kind of laughably so and didn't even acknowledge the fact that, let's be honest, we all know he had the affair with Stormy Daniels. And he, instead of trying to approve it was not a crime, saying that this was just all some big extortion, some big setup, that left a lot of vulnerabilities in his case and made, the burden of proof, what the prosecutors had to put out there, a lot tougher, because then it could have been much more cut and dried. It could have been much more, favorable towards Trump in terms of what the prosecutors had to prove versus what Trump had to, defend against. But because he really denies the whole thing ever happens, and that is so incredible to the jury, that gave the prosecution a big, big advantage on this. And we saw the results as guilty was what the jury foreman declared into a microphone 34 times, one for each false record, before he and his fellow jurors, whose names were withheld from the public for their safety, filed out of the lower Manhattan courtroom. And it was quite a show. Over the weeks of testimony, a jury had met a varied cast of characters, from a tabloid maestro, David Pecker of the National Enquirer, a campaign spokeswoman, Hope Hicks, and the porn star Stormy Daniels. The testimony built to an epic showdown between the men at the heart of the case. Trump, a real estate mogul turned a reality TV impresario who exported his smash mouth instincts into presidential politics, and the star witness against him, Michael Cohen, the do-anything fixer whose loyalty he lost. In the waning days of the 2016 campaign, Cohen paid Daniels $130,000 to silence her story of a sexual liaison with Trump, who then agreed to cook the books to reimburse his fixer, prosecutors said. And, that's obviously what happened there, as, according to a jury of his peers. The defense lawyer attacked Cohen's credibility. They noted he once pleaded guilty to lying and argued that Trump never falsified any records. And again, that this whole thing was just one big extortion attempt, which the jury obviously found, given, that we all kind of know. And, the Stormy Daniels story has been out there. It's been very credible. There's been a lot of, outside evidence that people have found to back that up. The prosecutors were eventually able to put into the case, that Michael Cohen and everyone else was just making it all up, which was essentially the Trump case, was very, very kind of uncredible to the jury, because they did not take long. It was expected to go at least until Friday, the 31st of May, perhaps even into the weekend, to Monday. But that did not happen. It did not even make it till Friday, before 5 p.m. In closing arguments, one of Bragg's prosecutors said that Cohen had told lies for Trump. "We didn't choose Michael Cohen to be our witness. We didn't pick him up at the witness door," said the prosecutor, Joshua Steinglass, the former president. He said he had hired Cohen because he was willing to lie and cheat on Trump's behalf. Trump, who repeatedly violated a judge's order barring him from attacking Cohen and the jury, attended every day of a trial in a courthouse that had long ago lost its majesty, a fading hulk with cracked wood paneling and yellow fluorescent lighting that suited the case's seedier elements. There, in the center of the city justice system that accommodates all manner of mayhem, the former president glowered, muttered, and often closed his eyes, spending much of the trial either in a meditative state or apparently asleep. Shout out to Maggie Haberman and her reporting on there. So again, this is going to be really the only case that Trump faces before Election Day, and it's going to be a really serious deal here, especially with the sentencing on July 11th, that just over a month from now, that really all eyes will focus on. The other prosecutions concern quite loftier issues. I think the things that, when people associate Trump with criminality, these are the things, whether it be the classified documents, the rigging of the election, all that stuff, that when they think of Trump's criminality, that's what they think of. Those are the cases that they think of. And, if this one went as well as it did for the prosecution, imagine how those other cases are going to go. Again, if the prosecution, for example, with, Fannie Willis and Fulton County can get their goddamn act together. But anyway, we'll see about that. The conviction, a humiliating defeat for a man who has dwelled in legal gray zones for decades, bringing the nation's highest office to a new low. President Trump is the first president to lose or even face a criminal trial. And again, not that he should hold that title. George Bush, for example, is still alive and kicking, and many people associated with him. The prosecution unfolded against the backdrop of a politically polarized nation, and the reaction to the verdict could reflect that divide. Mike Johnson, Speaker of the House, called the verdict a shameful day in American history, while President Biden urged people to vote, saying there's only one way to keep Donald Trump out of the Oval Office, at the ballot box. And again, I think that is a very, very smart. And again, it's been a long time since I've given Biden unadulterated credit for his handling of something. I think this speech was very good. He essentially said, hey, listen, Trump had every effort to defend himself. He lost. He was unsuccessful, and he is a guilty man. But we're not going to be able to kick him off the ballot, kind of getting rid of some of these idiotic liberal fantasies about, we don't even have to deal with Trump at all. You do have to deal with Trump at all. You have to defeat him at the ballot box. He's not going to be in prison for long, even if he somehow, by some crazy set of circumstances, does make it to prison, in mid-July before his appeal process starts. He is going to be on the ballot in November. He needs to be beaten at the ballot box, and that is something that Joe Biden, I think, was very, very smart to say in his reaction, which we can take a listen to.
The American principle that no one is above the law was reaffirmed. Donald Trump was given every opportunity to defend himself. It was a state case, not a federal case, and it was heard by a jury of 12 citizens, 12 Americans, 12 people like you, like millions of Americans who served on juries. This jury is chosen the same way every jury in America is chosen. It was a process that Donald Trump's attorney was part of. The jury heard 5 weeks of evidence, 5 weeks. And after careful deliberation, the jury reached a unanimous verdict. They found Donald Trump guilty on all 34 felony counts. Now he'll be given the opportunity, as he should, to appeal that decision just like everyone else has that opportunity. That's how the American system of justice works. And it's reckless, it's dangerous, it's irresponsible for anyone to say this was rigged just because they don't like the verdict.
So there is Biden reacting to Trump on that, which is, again, pretty smart because he essentially moved on pretty quickly from there and did not give in or play into the Trump attacks, which would be pretty inevitable, which would be, you're someone who's trying to engage in this. You're someone who's trying to, you're celebrating this or whatever. Something that this fair legal process. Okay, we're moving on. And I'm not going to give Trump any juice to say that I'm gloating over the legal demise of my political opponent. But again, I think the bottom line is Trump here is convicted. I think it's justified because he is a uniquely criminal president on top of all the other criminality that pretty much every other president has done. He is somebody who I think is uniquely criminal. But I think the bottom line is you're not going to be able to stop him by just throwing him in jail, whether it be legally or whether it be good for the good of the country. This is a person whose ideas are embraced by enough of the country that you have to have him defeated routinely, as many times as it takes at the ballot box. And if you're somebody who can't do that, as in, it's seeming pretty rough for Joe Biden. But by the way, going to be very interesting to see how the polls go now that Trump is actually convicted. But the fact is that if you are somebody who cannot beat somebody who is even one time convicted in a presidential nomination contest, you are, what else can you say? Like, that's pretty pathetic. Like, maybe you shouldn't be given a second term if you're Joe Biden. You can't be someone who is literally a convicted criminal. All right. Okay, so let's get to the other part of that Biden speech that we just played, which was the ceasefire with regards to Gaza. The U.S. president's announcement comes as he faces widespread criticism over his Gaza policy in the lead up to the November election. So Israel has agreed, apparently, again, which is pretty interesting. I think we have to decode the reaction to this Biden speech. But so essentially what happened here is Biden comes out during, like around mid-afternoon or so today, and gives a speech, or really early afternoon, but whatever, and gives a speech that essentially lays out what he says is an Israel-endorsed plan for a ceasefire. This is as he faces mounting pressure and criticism over support for Israel's war effort. This is here in Al Jazeera, a comprehensive new proposal to end the war, a roadmap to an enduring, durable ceasefire. He said, he told the reporters that the proposal involves 3 phases, the first of which, again, by the way, if you listened to our show a few weeks ago, tell me if this sounds familiar from the Hamas proposal that was released and agreed upon by William Burns, by Qatar, by Egypt, by Hamas, and pretty much everyone except for Israel. William Burns, by the way, is the U.S. CIA director. So the first phase was see a number of captives held in the Gaza Strip, including women and elderly, released in exchange for hundreds of Palestinian prisoners in Israel, while humanitarian aid would surge into Gaza. There are American hostages who would be released at this stage, and we want them home, Biden said, adding Qatar had transmitted the proposal to the Palestinian group Hamas, which governs Gaza. In a statement shared on Telegram late Friday, Hamas said it welcomed Biden's remarks and called for a permanent ceasefire, withdrawal of Israeli occupation forces from the Gaza Strip, reconstruction, and in exchange of prisoners. The group said it was ready to respond positively and constructively to any proposal that includes those measures, which this proposal definitely does. By the way, this U.S. proposal, which is essentially almost verbatim the Hamas proposal, as well as the return of displaced Palestinians to their homes in Gaza, if Israel explicitly commits to it as well. So this is where we get to Benjamin Netanyahu's statement, which I find to be quite interesting. His office said in a statement, the Israel Prime Minister authorized the country's negotiating team to present a proposal to advance its goal of securing the release of captives in Gaza. So this is the statement here, issued immediately after President Biden's speech, calling Hamas, this is here in Times of Israel, the last reporting that we read there was from Al Jazeera, but Netanyahu's office says the Israeli government is united in the desire to return our hostages as soon as possible and is working to achieve this goal. Therefore, the Prime Minister authorized the negotiating team to present an outline for achieving this goal while insisting, again, this is the key part, while insisting the war will not end until all of its goals are achieved, including the return of all of our hostages and the elimination of Hamas's military and governmental capabilities. So, this, I think it's important to note, is not a reaction. They don't say either way, whether they don't outright reject or they don't outright endorse this proposal that Biden has said, which is a contrast to Hamas, who has said they positively view this proposal by Joe Biden here. The exact proposal outlined by Israel, including these conditional transitions from stage to stage, allows Israel to maintain these principles, the statement says. Which, again, I don't know if Netanyahu's office doesn't clarify whether its proposal is the same one described by by Biden during the speech, and doesn't refer directly to Biden's speech at all. This is from the Times of Israel here. So, again, no engagement with Biden's speech. What I think this is essentially just a load of noise here to say, we are kind of moving towards the similar goals that the U.S. states, but we're not going to respond and say at all what we think of the U.S. proposal, which I find to be very interesting, and I find to essentially mean that they're going to ignore what Biden said here, which would be very much in keeping with their past actions of essentially just plowing ahead with whatever they want to do. And it's going to be up to, again, Biden to, now that he has put forward a proposal that, again, Hamas has said they view positively here, it's going to be incumbent on Biden to, if he really wants this, to put a little, wink and a nod and a nudge. Really, it's going to take a pretty severe nudge into Israel to essentially wake them up and say, you got to accept this. Like, it's time, tap the watch. But again, here, in terms of broad reaction to this deal, is very interesting because we have seen so again, Biden puts out a deal that's essentially very similar to Hamas. He can't say that it was very similar to the deal that Hamas, Qatar, and Egypt negotiated earlier because that would look bad in terms of the ally. It would look like he's kowtowing to Hamas essentially, and it would look bad for, towards Israel and the relationship with Israel. So he essentially has to say that Israel proposed it, even though it is, again, very similar to the CIA, Egyptian, Qatari, Hamas agreed upon deal that was discussed 2-3 weeks ago. So he essentially states that he calls on both sides to come together, be magnanimous, and come and accept this deal. Hamas says they view this deal positively. Egypt, again, I think it's important to go back to the exact words of the statement because words here are very important in diplomacy. Netanyahu, this in times of Israel here, Netanyahu's office says the Israeli government is united in the desire to return our hostages as soon as possible and is working to achieve this goal. Therefore, the Prime Minister authorized the negotiating team to present an outline for achieving this goal while insisting the war will not end until all of our goals are achieved, including the return of our hostages, check, and the elimination of Hamas's military and governmental capabilities, Netanyahu's office says, which again, Biden is kind of working with them here on this when he says in his speech earlier today that Hamas is not capable of committing on October 7th. But does Israel agree on this here? And I think it's very, very interesting here as they go on to say the exact outline proposed by Israel, including the conditional transition from stage to stage, allows Israel to maintain the principle. So again, they're referring to this outline proposed by Israel. We assume that it's supposed to be what Biden's saying here. But when asked, again, by the Times of Israel, they go and ask the Netanyahu government, so is this outline what Biden also said? And they refuse to confirm it. So it's like, what's going on here? Again, if I had to guess, I guess you can record this and play it back in my face if I'm wrong. But if I had to guess, it will essentially come out that Israel will essentially reject this proposal without really rejecting it because they'll have some sort of excuse. They'll say it's not really up to snuff with our goals here. We have this proposal. Because again, why won't Netanyahu's office clarify whether the proposal is the same one described by Biden during the speech? And why doesn't the statement refer to any sort of engagement, be it positive or negative, with what Biden had to say? We've already heard some anonymous briefings from Israeli government officials towards Israeli news media that they view this as essentially a Hamas-written speech. So it seems like they're essentially going to go out of their way to release a bunch of kind of noise, English statement noise, to the international world to act like, well, we want the same things. We're kind of, in agreement. We want to keep going until all of our goals are achieved, but are they achieved? We kind of think maybe not. Well, again, in their heart of hearts, knowing that they're not, and attacking Rafah as they attacked Rafah literally today or Friday. And then Biden will essentially act as if nothing happened. Hamas will be like, hey, wait a minute, we kind of agreed to this. And then, Biden and Israel will essentially turn around to Hamas and say, why didn't you accept this deal that we laid out? Something like that. It's really a weird situation. It's like, it really does appear to be rejecting this ceasefire proposal essentially in all terms, with some of the anonymous briefings and with the Prime Minister's office saying that while the negotiations have a framework, the war will not end until the elimination of Hamas's military and governmental capabilities, which they clearly think, even though Biden may disagree, that has not happened yet. Hamas has not been sufficiently eliminated yet in Israel's eyes, and they want to keep killing until they find it suitable. This is the Hamas statement here. The Islamic resistance movement, Hamas, views positively the contents of President Joe Biden's speech today, 31 of May 2024, in which he calls for a permanent ceasefire, the withdrawal of occupation forces from the Gaza Strip, reconstruction, and the exchange of prisoners. We consider this American position and the reinforced conviction on the regional and international stage of the necessity to put an end to the war on Gaza to be the result of the legendary steadfastness of our struggling people and their brave resistance. So, again, it looks like Biden puts out a proposal. Bottom line here, very similar to the one that Hamas, Will Burns of the CIA, and Qatar and Egypt had agreed to, pretty much everything except for Israel, very, very similar to that text, pretends it's Israel's, and Israel says, we don't really want to stop because we don't think all of our aims have been met. That seems like where we are right now. Israel flat out rejecting this ceasefire, but we will pay attention to the story very, very closely over time. Meanwhile, this is in Axios. All 4 congressional leaders have officially signed on to a letter inviting Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to address Congress. Multiple sources familiar with the matter confirmed to Axios. The speech, which has been in the works for months, threatens to ignite already simmering tensions within Congress over the war on Gaza. The plan is to address within the next 8 weeks or soon, to have the address within the next 8 weeks or soon after Congress's August recess, according to a source familiar with the matter. So it's coming up pretty damn soon. Netanyahu's office did not immediately respond to requests for comment. The invite is signed by both the Speaker of the House and Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, Chuck Schumer, and Mitch McConnell of the Senate. They say, we join the state of Israel in your struggle against terror, especially as Hamas can do blah, blah, blah. For this reason, on behalf of the bipartisan leadership of the United States House of Representatives and the Senate, we would like to invite you to join a joint meeting of Congress. Many progressive lawmakers have said they will boycott the address, similar to the dozens who declined to attend Netanyahu's controversial of that address to Congress in 2015. So again, really what this is a relatively smart move by Mike Johnson, one of the few smart moves that he's actually made to essentially embarrass the Democrats here. They're inviting somebody who has essentially spat in their face for the past 5-6 months pretty openly in terms of every request to stop with civilian casualties, to try and limit the war. And I think Biden kind of knows that and is essentially being Netanyahu's piss pig pretty willingly, because he doesn't want to he doesn't want to take the other strategy of actually standing up to Netanyahu, or essentially doing the Mike Johnson strategy of essentially letting everything happen exactly the way Netanyahu wants. So he's essentially saying, no, Netanyahu, please stop it. I really care, when he doesn't really care. And Netanyahu, for his own base, essentially saying, screw you, Biden. I'm doing exactly whatever the hell I want. That is kind of the background of the speech. Then Biden, after getting pretty much embarrassed, has to watch his 2 compatriots in the House and Senate, the 2 leaders of the Democrats in the House and the Senate, Jeffries and Schumer, sign this letter to invite Benjamin Netanyahu to Congress to essentially say, we are going to have a speech from this guy who is a genocidal maniac who, if the reporting is to be believed, Netanyahu has had some pretty tough conversations with Biden over the past 5, 6, 7 months. And Netanyahu, pretty much by all accounts, is going to make a speech endorsing Trump. And this is going to be something that both Democratic leaders have signed on to. And Biden is, of course, going to have to pay some sort of lip service too. So again, it's a massive cell phone, a massive humiliation by the Democrats here. And it is going to continue to be as this whole thing plays out. It'll also be very interesting to see what kind of a stink progressives make, which we'll follow quite intensely as time goes by. All right. So we got for you guys today on a momentous day in American history. Conviction of the first U.S. president ever. And Biden continuing to humiliate himself. We'll be back on Monday.